So there are four kinds of organic macromolecules. Let's just pause here and look at the word macromolecule. So macro means large. Molecule in chemistry are two or more nonmetals bound together. Water is a molecule, H2O. But we're going to talk about macromolecules. They are much larger than water. So the first macromolecule we're going to talk about is carbohydrates, CH2O to the N power, which just tells you here's your basic monomer setup where you have carbon, hydrogens, and oxygens. So when you eat a carbohydrate, that is a polymer of a bunch of sugars put together. So the monomer of a carbohydrate, which is a polymer, like we just learned, is a monosaccharide. Mono means one. Saccharide means sugar, so one sugar, or a simple sugar. Examples for you to know: glucose, fructose, and galactose. Down here is glucose. This is what goes into your bloodstream. This is what your cells use to make ATP. If you're a diabetic, you have to worry about your glucose levels in your bloodstream because too high or too low is dangerous. If you don't have diabetes, that just means that your body produces a chemical called insulin, and that controls the level of glucose in your body. Fructose is the sugar that's found in fruit, and galactose is really just a flipped glucose molecule. So notice too, all carbohydrates are hydrophilic. They dissolve in water. All right, why do we need carbohydrates in our body? So we need carbohydrates in our body because we need to make ATP, which is instant energy. So simple sugars, we eat carbohydrates, our body breaks that down into its simple sugar, its monosaccharide, and then the plants and animals and other organisms can turn that simple sugar into ATP, which is energy. So it's very important for us to consume those carbohydrates. Now, our body will turn glucose into something called glycogen, which is a polymer or a polysaccharide, many sugars, and that we store energy in our muscles. So in animals, we can turn some glucose into glycogen, which is just putting them together. And then we store that glycogen in our muscles, and then our body will use that glycogen storage when we're exercising to give us the energy we need to keep making ATP and to keep doing the exercise. This is something your body has to replace constantly. So this is why if you're an athlete, you might do something called carbo load the night before. Eat a bunch of carbs the night before, then your body's going to store glycogen in your muscles, and then you're going to be ready for the game or the race. And then after, you're going to want to eat some protein to replace the protein of the muscle that you used during the race. So starch is the polysaccharide that plants use to store things. So they put together their glucose into a form called starch, and then they store it. And so a lot of times they'll store starch in their roots, and sometimes that could become what's called a tuber, which the most common starch tuber that you know of would be a potato. It's just 100% starch. That potato is really for the potato plant to use energy for later, but we like to eat that potato and then we get energy. So that's kind of how it works. And then there's cellulose, which is another polysaccharide that specifically makes up what's called a cell wall in plants. So plants have extra outside wall to kind of give them some structure. Animal cells do not have cell walls, so this is not something we have, but plants have the cellulose around their cell walls. And what foods are we going to find? Carbohydrates. we're going to find them. Obviously, sugar is a simple form of carbohydrate. Pasta, bread, rice, potato, fruits, vegetables all contain carbohydrates or at least sugar. And then the math that you might be asked to do is that, or to memorize as well, is that 1 gram of carbohydrates equals 4 calories. So if you have if you eat 10 grams of potatoes, that's 40 calories. So that's how that math works. And that finishes up carbohydrates.